Hey, this will be a tutorial all about Y-Run in Super Mario 64 DS. It'll be focused mainly as a tutorial for tasking this game, but I think that non-tasters will be able to learn a lot from this video as well. So for the first, I'm going to first show what normal running looks like. You can see I have a max speed of 131,000. This is the same as if you run with a touchscreen like this. You also get this max speed. But this is only the speed for Yoshi as well. For other characters, it's different. Um, but with Y-Run, here's what you have to do. So I'm going to start charging Y-Run on this frame 20. And you'll see that exactly 60 frames later, well, okay, 62 frames later, it's one extra frame, you will, the Y-Run timer value will change to 30. And this represents how many frames of Y-Run we have. But it being non-zero just simply means we have Y-Run. So now if we run, we get a max speed of 157,000, which is 20% more speed. And this is also the same if you use touchscreen. And so if you want to start using Y-Run with the touchscreen, I recommend creating the circle while you charge Y-Run. And then once you have Y-Run charged, you need to hold Y and continue running like this, and you can get the same speed, same way. You may have noticed when you start charging Y-Run, the first frame you start moving, you actually go all the way to 122,000 speed, which is actually another way of writing 30 speed. And that's really the huge benefit of Y-Run. Not the greater speed, but really the greater acceleration is really why you want to use Y-Run. The greater speed is pretty good too. There's one thing I want to mention right now. Just like when you run normally on slopes, you slow down a little bit. The same thing happens when you use Y-Run. You slow down a little bit on slopes, depending on the steepness. The one important thing to keep in mind, though, if you start charging Y-Run on a slope, you can't use the Y-Run acceleration. In general, you can't use Y-Run acceleration on a slope. We'll get into more about that later. But yeah, it's just as if you were walking normally on the slope, but it still consumes the Y-Run timer, which is kind of annoying. So now to explain the Y-Run timer itself, as we saw before, it starts at 30. Every frame you run, you lose 1 unit of Y-Run. Pretty simple. When you're tasking, it's a little more complicated yet because of the way that there's 2 frames for every real frame. So you'll actually lose 1 unit every 2 frames if you're going by the Dizmumi frame count. And then when you reach 0, of course, you will go back to normal running, even if you're holding Y. But as I said before, the real great thing about Y-Run is not its speed, but its acceleration. So let me explain why what I mean by that. So we can get this great speed, but if you jump, you can maintain the Y-Run timer where it is, but but you can move without decreasing the timer at all. And then when you land again, if you hold Y, you can instantly start accelerating back to your top Y-Run speed. So essentially this means that you can, let's see, even if I get like really low speed or something, I'm not gonna get that low, but this means that you can keep this Y-Run speed stored for much longer than a second, which is normally how long that you would last with the 30 units. So there, you can see that you can get up to top Y-Run speed the same way you would right when you start, right after charging Y-Run, you can do it the same way as when you land for a jump. And this doesn't work only from a jump, of course, it works from pretty much anything. Almost everything will keep your Y-Run timer. There's only a few things that actually get rid of Y-Run timer. Obviously, letting it run out is one way to lose the Y-run timer. Another way is if you ever run without holding Y, it instantly goes to 0. So that's an important thing to know. You always have to hold Y. Even if you're pressing the touchscreen, you need to hold Y. Another important way to lose Y-run is if you hold neutral. If you're using the touchscreen, this means if you go into the center of the touchscreen or anywhere. Actually, I should probably show this with the touchscreen. So I'm going to charge Y-run. And then from here, if I go in the center of the touchscreen, maybe like a little bit away from the center even, and hold Y, it goes to 0 as well. So there's a range. I think it's like 7 units around the center of the touchscreen, circle, where even if you hold Y, you're not quite in the center, it'll still go to, your Y-run timer will still instantly drop to 0. One of the other things that takes away Y-run is entering any sort of transition, any loading zone basically, and this includes paintings as well as loading zones between rooms in the castle, loading zones inside a course like entering the cabin in CCM. But right now you can see, I mean, entering a new area like this, it completely resets all your movement related values, and that will include the Y-run timer. Another more subtle thing that takes away Y-run is collecting a star, even if it doesn't make you leave the level. So for example, if I charge Y-run and collect this 100 coin star, and then try to hold Y-run, try to start continuing Y-run after the text box, you'll see that it goes to 0 before you can do anything. But that's pretty much everything that gets rid of Y-run. So with that in mind, there are lots of things that set your speed to 0 without getting rid of your Y-run. So for instance, probably the biggest one is doors. So I'll charge Y-run, then I go into this door. The speed's set to 0 when you enter the door, but then right after gaining control in the next room, you get to go all the way to Y-run speed right away. Another big one is ledges, climbing ledges. So for instance, charge Y-run, jump up to this ledge. See, speed gets us to 0, and then you can immediately start running when you get on the ledge again. Just demonstrate this. Some other important ones are collecting caps in a level, not starting with a cap, but when you collect one inside a level. That'll also set your speed to 0, and you can keep Y-run through it. Another one is taking damage whenever that's necessary. Another one, this doesn't really fall in the same line as all the other ones, but whenever you have to wait for over a second for something to happen, it's often worth it to charge Y-run during that time. But in the vast majority of cases, it won't be obvious whether it's fast to use Y-run or not. And you'll have to do some testing to see whether or not it is. For example, if none of the above happen, no doors, no caps, none of that, no ledges, it still might be useful to use Y-run, but it won't be obvious. So you'll have to do some testing with and without Y-run to know for sure. So now I'm going to talk about a few other uses of Y-run, reasons why it's good to have it. Whenever you do a jump or a long jump, almost every move, your speed that you start the move with is just based on whatever speed you had when you were walking or running. So starting a long jump with Y-run, for instance, long jumps, their speed is 1.5 times the speed you had before long jump. So, for example, Yoshi starts the long jump with 235,000 speed. And another great thing is that you keep Y-run through bonks too. I didn't press Y fast enough though. Another great thing is also your jump height depends on what speed you have. So with Y-run you can jump higher. I don't have vertical speed displayed right now, but this is, for instance, why when doing endless stair skip with a triple jump, you need to charge Y-run because it makes the triple jump go higher. Important thing to keep in mind when tasking, or even non-tasks, whenever you do a jump or long jump with Y run, you will start the move with greater than maximum speed. So for instance, Yoshi's maximum jump speed is 108,000, but I just started the jump with, he started with 121,000, I believe. 125,000, sorry about that. And in this situation, you want to do no direction trick, which allows your speed to decrease by less when you have greater than the maximum speed. And the reason I wanted to mention this here is because the normal canonical reason why you want to use no direction trick is when you're doing no input long jumps, but it's also useful here when starting a jump from having Y run, and also similarly when starting a long jump with Y run. It's a bad angle, but whatever. Normally, so when your long jump speed is going to decrease by 6,000 if you hold a direction, but if you don't hold anything, it only decreases by 2,000 each frame. So it's also useful to use just when doing a long jump starting with Y run speed. So now I'm going to talk about some more technical things you can do with Y run with the touchscreen. So I've gotten max Y run speed here with the touchscreen, and you'll notice that if you go slightly not all the way out in the circle, you get some different speed, 139,000. If you go slightly closer to the middle, there's 34,000, so it's a lot less. There's 109,000. You can get pretty much any, for Yoshi, you can get pretty much any speed between 157,000 and 96,000 with increments of like 4,000. But you can also get very low, down to 34,000. And the reason for this is, remember when I said earlier that on any frame you can gain 30 speed, which is the same as 122,000 speed. You can also lose up to 122,000 speed on one frame. And this is 122,000 speed, less than the max 157K. The great thing is that this allows you to reach 0 speed in only 2 frames, starting from the max Y run speed. So in the next frame, I can press down here and get 0 speed. Now, you have to be careful here, because if you go too close to the center of the touchscreen, you will lose your Y run. Right there, I did it. Yep, it takes 2 frames. So there's a actually very specific range. I believe it's 2 units radius around the circle, where you can get 0 speed and not lose Y run. So we typically refer to this as like the edge of the red circle. This is what it's useful for. Let me try to get that again. Oh, that's not the right state. So yeah, there you go, 0 speed. Anywhere like higher, you get lower speed, but not all the way down to 0 speed. So 0 speed is useful for talking to NPCs and things like that, but what it's really useful for is being able to turn around quickly. And let me explain why that is. So normally when you turn, your facing angle can change by 2,000 units and your motion angle can change by 6,000 units. But when starting from 0 speed, it's a little different. So if I go over here, you'll see that my facing angle is pretty much like normal. My facing angle is changing by, well, not like my head of myself right here. Facing angle is changing by around 2,000. But as you start to get around here, now my facing angle is changing by 6,000. My motion angle is changing by 24,000. This is a lot more of a turn than you would get normally. So you get some crazy angles like this. There's a pretty good range where you can do this as well. And there's a lot of variety of the angles you can get. And if you're on the left side, then you'll turn left similarly a lot. It's important to remember that when you do this for one frame, you won't have max Y run speed right away. So you'll have to turn for 2 frames. If you want to get full Y run speed before doing a jump or long jump or whatever you want to do next, you need to do for 2 frames. So keep in mind your angle is going to change on the 2nd frame as well. So it can get complicated to figure out what angle you want, because it's kind of strange because you're turning by so much. But usually you'll be able to find something that'll work. So remember that the maximum speed you can lose in one frame is 122,000. This means that in some cases it can be beneficial to intentionally get less than 122,000 speed before landing from something. Remember, from starting with full Wyron speed, it'll always take 2 frames or 4 frames, if you can count the lag frames, to get from max Wyron speed to 0 speed. But for instance, if you land from a jump, landing speed, it's not too hard to get that to be less than 102,000 speed, and then you can get to 0 speed in only 1 frame. So that's useful in some cases. The last major thing I want to talk about is Wyron conservation. And this is pretty important in a lot of cases when you have a route that you're going to lose speed in lots of places and you want to be able to utilize the Wyron acceleration after all of them. Remember that when running normally, you lose 1 unit every 2 frames. When you're in the air, you don't lose it at all, but jumping is slower than running, and long jumping is, well, it's faster, but you don't always want to long jump everywhere because you might stay there for too long, and you might not have enough distance to long jump. So here's a few ways to keep your Y-run timer where it is, but also keep speed. The most important one is kicking, which is why I brought out Luigi. You'll see that I have max Y-run speed with Luigi, same as Yoshi. And if I kick, then you keep the same speed you had before kicking, but you can also keep the Y-run timer, so it's pretty useful in a lot of cases. Another important one is punching. Similar to kicking, it goes a little bit less distance and it's a little bit slower because you lose speed during the punch. However, if you try to punch with this high speed, you'll actually dive. And diving is actually not bad for keeping Y-run as well. It's sometimes better than long jumping, but long jumping is almost always better than diving. But there's certainly cases where diving is good. But punching is probably better for keeping Y-run. And the way you do this with high speed is you just have to hit A and B for 1 frame or 2 frames when passing, and then you will punch. And you can see that I keep Y-run. I only lose a little bit of speed. You lose 2,000 speed every frame, which isn't that bad. The punch lasts, I think, like 18 frames before you can punch again or kick or something. You can kick out of a punch by holding A. I actually did another punch. Yep, that's right. I forgot how this game works, but whatever. The point is, you can do different lengths of kicks and punches to go the exact distance you want to go while keeping Y-run and not losing too much speed overall. Now, if you're Yoshi and you can't kick or punch, there's a few options still. I mentioned jumping earlier is slower, but it can be used to maintain Y-run too. And in some cases where you really need to maintain it, but you don't, but it's worth losing some speed to maintain it. Another option is frame sliding. Skiko has a pretty good tutorial about frame sliding, so I recommend watching that to really learn how it works. But the point is, when you during the neutral frame of frame sliding, you don't lose Y-run, but you still get distance. So I'll show you. I go backwards, slide backwards. You lose Y-run in this frame, but then when you go to neutral, you have 131,000 speed. So this is like the normal running speed you keep for 1 frame, but you do not lose Y-run. So there's kind of well, not really 2 ways. There's a few ways to use frame sliding for keeping Y-run. You can either alternate between oops, I actually went to 0 speed. That's also true. So when doing frame sliding, you need to be careful to not get down to 0 speed because you're pressing the center, and you can only do that in certain times when you have Y-run to not lose 0 speed. Let me try that again. I might be able to do it. I think maybe if I go up a frame earlier. There we go. So I got max Y-run speed again in 1 frame, and then you can go down center up like that to keep on going. Your other option is to just alternate between down and center, and this will keep you at normal running speed. Let me show you. So once this takes you to normal running speed, you can keep normal running speed. If you hold Y, you will just lose 1 Y run every 4 frames now. But you will have running speed. So this can be useful in some cases. If you do the other option of alternating between, doing the cycle between the 3 positions, forward, back, and neutral, then you will lose 2 Y run every 6 frames, but you will have higher speed when on the sliding frame. You'll have max Y run speed then instead of the normal running speed. And so there's a trade-off there. The last method of Y run conservation I want to talk about is delayed long jumps. And the way this works is if you are running, in this case I have full Y run speed, of course, you can press R and then you have 14 frames of the crouching animation where you won't lose any speed, and because you're not running, you won't lose Y run timer either. So all the way up to here, you can see on the 14th frame I start losing speed, but even then, by long jump, you get a pretty decent amount of speed. And so this is useful for maintaining Y run, because if you ever want to long jump but your destination is a little bit further, then instead of running after the long jump, it's probably better to delay the long jump, because that will make it so you do not lose Y run during those frames when you're going that little extra distance. Whenever you run out of Y run, there's a little trick you can do to keep the Y run speed for a little bit longer. So instead of just holding outside here, which will make you lose speed, every 2 frames you lose 4,000 speed, you can instead go neutral, and you can keep that top Y run speed for 6 frames while the timer is 0. So you can see on the 7th, 8th frame, it goes down to 48,000. Let's just do 6 frames, and then go up again. You're back to 153,000, so 4,000 less, and then neutral again. Oops, actually move the circle a little bit, so it gets a little more complicated. But basically, if you go exactly neutral every time, and the normal distance out, you can lose 4,000 speed every 8 frames, which is a lot better than just losing 4,000 speed every 2 frames. And then you will lose the speed all the way down to the normal running speed. And the other important thing to know is that when you're doing this running with neutral trick, you can't change direction, but you can change direction on every 1 in 4 frames when you go to get the top speed again. So that was a lot of information. Hopefully you were able to follow it all. There are plenty of details I didn't talk about, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and thanks for watching.